November 5th, 2025. Puerto Cabello, 4:36 a.m. The sea was still dark, a black sheet broken only by the pale shimmer of moonlit swells, when 4 Venezuelan Navy patrol boats slipped out of Puerto Cabello under strict radio silence. Their engines hummed low, barely above the whisper of surf against steel hulls. Each vessel carried a crew running on adrenaline and political orders. Orders they didn't fully understand, but dared not question. Mounted on their decks were 12.7mm heavy machine guns and old Soviet-era 73mm launchers, weapons more suited for intimidation than for war. But their mission wasn't war. Not officially. Intercept the American warship entering Bolivarian waters. Simple on paper. Dangerous everywhere else. What they didn't know, what nobody in Caracas knew, was that their intelligence was already fatally wrong. The target they'd been assigned wasn't a lone American destroyer patrolling without support. The ocean ahead wasn't empty. It was occupied by a colossus. 5 hours earlier, the USS Dwight D. Eisenhower, 100,000 tons of nuclear-powered steel and anger, had altered course, shifting the entire carrier strike group eastward. Now, 6 U.S. warships formed a layered shield around her, an armored phalanx gliding through the Caribbean like a silent titan. The Venezuelans weren't heading toward a single target. They were rushing straight at one of the most lethal naval formations afloat. But they didn't know that yet. By 5:21 a.m., 27 miles away, deep inside the Eisenhower's Combat Information Center, a radar operator leaned closer to his screen as faint blips flickered on the southern edge of the display. Small, fast, uncoordinated. Bridge, combat. We have 4 surface contacts, closing. The captain turned his head, expression steady, almost bored. Copy. Let's light them up. Within seconds, the destroyers USS Gravely and USS Mason shifted formation, sliding forward like wolves taking point. Their escort geometry tightened. Phalanx CIWS turrets rotated to standby. VLS cells sat armed beneath steel hatches. Every sailor on deck recognized the pattern. This was no exercise. This was a defensive wedge, a warning, a line in the water. Meanwhile, the Venezuelan-led boat N-23 pushed past 40 knots. Its captain believed they were hunting a single American destroyer, an easy propaganda victory waiting to be filmed. His radar tech never noticed the enormous return blooming behind that destroyer-sized echo, because you don't look for a carrier when your orders say destroyer. At 5:48, they broke radio silence. American vessel, you are entering Bolivarian waters. Alter course immediately. Static. That was all they got. 3 minutes later, they saw it. And every sailor aboard N-23 understood instantly what had gone wrong. The silhouette rising over the horizon wasn't narrow like a destroyer. It was a mountain, a floating city, 4.5 acres of armored deck reflecting the first hints of dawn. They were staring at the USS Dwight D. Eisenhower. Behind her, destroyers. Beyond them, a guided missile cruiser. Above them, the thrum of helicopter rotors sweeping the surface with sonar and infrared. In seconds, the Venezuelans went from confident hunters to startled intruders staring into the face of overwhelming American firepower. They hadn't stumbled onto a ship, they had wandered into a fully alert carrier strike group. The Eisenhower herself, callsign Ike, towered like a steel metropolis over the waves. Nearly 70 aircraft slept on her deck and in her hangars, ready to launch. To her crew, she was home. To her enemies, she was a storm from hell. Guarding her were the Arleigh destroyers Gravely and Mason, each bristling with more than 90 vertical launch cells, filled with Tomahawk missiles, SM-2 interceptors, and Sea Sparrow defenses. On the outer ring, the cruiser Philippine Sea scanned everything within 250 miles, its Aegis system feeding a digital war map more detailed than anything the Venezuelans could imagine. When the 4 small patrol boats appeared, every ship saw them simultaneously. The network tagged them automatically. Skunk Alpha 1 through 4, unknown surface contacts, speed 42 knots, course north. Then came the first American order. Maintain course, Do not engage unless fired upon. Experience had taught the US Navy a simple truth: never blink first. Let the other side approach just long enough to realize how badly they've misjudged the situation. But the Venezuelans didn't recognize the signals. At 5:52, Gravely's radar operator called out, "Contacts accelerating. Bearing steady." Those words electrified the entire CIC. 4 blips crawled across the radar display. No evasive maneuvers, no hesitation, just a straight charge. Smugglers don't do that, but trained crews do. High above the waves, an MH-60R Seahawk launched from the Eisenhower, slicing into the dawn sky. The pilot climbed to 500 feet and activated sensors, visual contact. 4 fast patrol craft, navy gray, Venezuelan flags, weapons mounted forward. The camera streamed the feed live to every ship. White wakes. Fast approach. No signs of slowing. At 6:1, the Venezuelan squadron finally locked onto what they thought was Echo 2, a lone destroyer. Their plan was embarrassingly simple. Buzz close, fire a few warning bursts into the water, film it, claim they had forced an American ship to retreat. Caracas wanted a political victory. Instead, they were staring at a strategic nightmare. As the immense outline of the carrier resolved into full view, N-23's captain froze. His radar screen flooded with reflections from elevators, aircraft towers, and deck structures. The contact wasn't 2 ships. It wasn't a destroyer. It was the Eisenhower herself. By then, the US formation was at full alert. Gravely and Mason moved to block any approach. Helicopters hovered overhead. Inside the Eisenhower's Combat Direction Center, fire control systems tracked every movement of the approaching craft. Then, the Venezuelans made the mistake nobody recovers from. 2 short bursts, fired into the water. Warning shots. For show. But, on a US carrier group at Condition 2, muzzle flashes aren't for show. They're threat indicators. Instantly, Gravely's fire control radar locked on. Alarms screamed inside the Venezuelan cabins. Missile lock tones, a sound most of them had only heard in training, echoed through metal walls. Panic replaced bravado. Their commander's voice cracked over radio. Cease approach! Cease approach! Disengage! But events were moving faster than orders. At 6:3, the Eisenhower quietly shifted to Condition 1. Weapons release authorized for self-defense. On the Gravely, sailors manned the 5-inch gun. The Phalanx CIWS rotated, barrels spinning at 4,500 rounds per minute, ready to fill the sky and sea with tungsten. Above, the Seahawk dropped to 200 feet. Its operator zoomed in on the Venezuelan gunners' bandanas, helmets, hands shaking on their triggers. Then came the final trigger point. "Bridge, we are painted," the Seahawk pilot said. "Fire control radar from patrol craft is locking on to Gravely. No more guessing. No more misinterpretation." The rules of engagement checklist was opened. The clock started ticking. 1 full minute of unbearable tension followed. At sea, a minute can feel like a lifetime. The Venezuelans slowed slightly, then one boat surged forward again, cutting across the waves at 45 knots toward Gravely's bow. Standby countermeasures. Chaff pods armed. Laser designators warmed. One twitch of a trigger could start a war. At 6:07, the tension snapped. One Venezuelan craft, Hull 23, swung wide, turning back toward the carrier's southern flank. Whether it was confusion or pride or just terrible communication, nobody knew. But to American radar operators, it was an attack run. Contact closing fast, bearing 211. Distance 1.5 nautical miles. The Mason shifted course, inserting itself between the carrier and the incoming boat. CIWS rotated. Missile hatches opened. 2 green flares launched into the sky. Turn away now. No response. Then, the mistake that nearly ended everything. The Venezuelan gunner racked his weapon's charging handle. A metallic click picked up by the Seahawk's microphone. Muzzle movement confirmed, the pilot called. Target within 900 yards. Gravely's captain lifted his hand. Hold fire. just a second longer. At 6:08, the Venezuelan boat peeled away in a hard port turn, throwing up a wall of white spray. The remaining craft followed, one by one, fading from radar. The American guns stayed ready long after the danger passed, because turning away isn't the same as standing down. By 7 a.m., the sea was empty again. No contacts, no echoes. The strike group resumed course at 20 knots. But the confrontation wasn't over. 2 hours later, Venezuelan state media released a grainy video claiming they had repelled an American incursion. Washington responded with satellite imagery and radar logs proving the US group had remained in international waters over 80 miles offshore. Caracas called it sovereign defense. The Pentagon called it reckless brinkmanship. Neither side backed down. And yet, no shots had been fired, no casualties, just a near miss on the edge of dawn. But sailors knew better. They had lived the truth. Out there, the line between peace and war is as thin as static on a radio. Misread radar returns, outdated intel, a misinterpreted maneuver, a single nervous finger on a trigger. That's all it takes. By the next morning, the Eisenhower quietly moved north. The Venezuelan boats returned to port under radio silence. Official statements softened. The crisis faded. But everyone who was there knew the ocean keeps its own memories. Because at sea, there is no replay button. No second chance. Once you make a move, you live with the consequences. So here's the question. You're standing on the bridge, alarms blaring, 4 fast boats racing toward your ship at 40 knots. Do you hold fire and risk taking the first hit? Or do you open fire and risk starting a war? Tell me in the comments, what would you do? And if you enjoyed this debrief, hit like, share it with someone who loves naval stories, and subscribe so you never miss the next close call from the world's oceans. If you want to take it further, join the channel, support the fleet, help bring more true maritime stories to the surface. In the end, the Venezuelan Navy didn't just pick the wrong target, they picked the worst possible day to trust the wrong radar. I'll see you in the next one.